Welcome back to the third and final installment of this St. Corona series. I almost left off making this part 3 due to my very limited understanding of the ideas presented here. So much more work still needs to be done, of course. But again, I'm hoping that some feedback will help me to develop these ideas further. So now we're going to have a look at St. Corona's particularly gruesome method of execution, that of being torn apart by two trees. And it turns out it's somewhat of a literary trope. First we have Emperor Aurelian, who reigned from 270 to 275 AD. He had a reputation for strictness to the point where if his soldiers seduced the wives of their hosts, he would subject them to being torn apart by two trees. It was rumored that his wife Ulpia had cheated on him, which is why he had such a hatred for his own soldiers for luring women from their husbands who were at war. And this is a beer label. The beer is called Torn Apart by Trees from Nightmare Brewing Company, and it rather gives a new light into the beer virus, so-called. I guess this method of execution is a Persian one. After the defeat of Darius III by Alexander the Great, the Persian monarchy was thrown into turmoil and Darius was killed. One man, Bessus, claimed the throne as Artaxerxes V, but in 329 BC, Alexander had him executed. The manner of Bessus's death is disputed. He may have been crucified or torn apart by recoiling trees, or what is most likely, mutilated before being sent to Ecbatana for execution. This is James Justin Morier, and he was a British diplomat and author noted for his novels about the Kahar dynasty in Iran, most famously for the Haji Baba series. The method of tying people to bent down trees, which are then allowed to recoil, ripping the individual to pieces in the process, is mentioned by several travelers in the 19th century to Persia. The British diplomat James Justin Morier traveled to a special envoy to the Shah in 1808, and Morier writes the following concerning the prevailing criminal justice. For the king never pardons theft and orders a convicted thief to be executed instantly. The mode is as follows. Two young trees are by main strength brought together at their summits, and there fastened with cords together. The culprit is then brought out, and his legs are tied with ropes, which are again carried up and fixed to the top of the trees. The cords that force the trees together are then cut, and in the elasticity and power of this spring, the body of the thief is torn asunder, and left to thus hang divided on each separate tree. The inflexibility of the king on this point has given to the roads a security which in former times was little known. Here is the Lion of Judah in Iran. Morier was the son of Isaac Morier, and he is a Swiss-born merchant, educated in London, and he became an agent of the East India Company, and he died from the plague in Constantinople. This is the Levant Company, which is an English chartered company formed in 1592 by Elizabeth I, and approved in its initial charter on September 11th, 1592, when the Venice Company and the Turkey Company merged. It regulated the English trade with the Ottoman Empire and the Levant. They were called Turkey merchants, so these are white men going native. This is the Levant. It includes Damascus and Syria, all areas of St. Corona. I believe these Turkey merchants were embodying the fifth stage of the Mithraic initiation, that of Persis the Persian. And You can read about it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the semen of the bull is taken and purified. Symbols are the sickle. The sickle is a symbol of Saturn, the divine reaper. Again, September 11th. Why is that so important? It's very important to the city of Zurich, the financial center of Switzerland, because their patron saints, Felix and Regula, have their feast day on September 11th. See, Felix and Regula were members of the Theban Legion under Saint Maurice, who came from Egypt. They were a legion of Christian soldiers. They were stationed in the canton of Valais, Switzerland. When the legion was to be executed in 286, they fled, reaching Zurich before they were caught, tried, and executed. After decapitation, they miraculously stood on their feet and picked up their own heads, walked 40 paces uphill, and prayed before lying down in death. They were buried on the spot where they lay down, on the hilltop, which would become the site of the Grossmünster Church. In the Coptic calendar of Alexandria, Egypt, the first day of the year is Thoth 1, or September 11th in the Gregorian calendar. Zurich is among the world's largest financial centers despite having a relatively small population. Most Swiss banks have their headquarters in Zurich. And the irony is, I was in Zurich on September 11th, 2001. We also find this form of dismemberment in the Theseus cycle of Greek mythology, in the character of Sinis the pine bender, or Pt.3. And palm trees and pine trees are both evergreens. Theseus was a mythical king and founder hero of Athens. He's most famous for the slaying of the Minotaur. His mother, Ithra, slept with Aegeus, the goat man, and Poseidon in the same night, giving Theseus both a divine and mortal nature. After retrieving his father's sandals and sword from under a rock, he set off from Trozen to Athens to claim his birthright. He follows the dangerous path around the Saronic Gulf, where he encounters a string of 6 entrances to the underworld, each guarded by a chthonic enemy, or spirit of the underworld. The Saronic Gulf is a string of 6 entrances to the underworld, each guarded by a chthonic enemy in the shape of a thief or a bandit, named for the mythological king Sauron of Trozen. At the Isthmian entrance to the underworld was a bandit named Sinis, often called Pitiocamptes, he who bends pine trees. He would capture travelers, tie them between 2 pine trees that were bent down to the ground, and then let the trees go, tearing his victims apart. Theseus slew him by his own method. He then seduced Sinis's daughter, Perigune, fathering the child Melanippus. This is Perigune, the beautiful daughter of Sinis, a.k.a. Perigenia, in Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dreams. After Theseus killed her father, she hid herself in a bed of rushes and asparagus. Theseus rapes her. She later bore Theseus's first male heir, Melanippus, who became the ancestor of the Ioxids of Caria. Here's a depiction of Saint Corona being strung upside down between 2 pine trees. You don't see that very often. And here is Pitiocamptes. So the bent evergreen seems to be a portal to the underworld. Sinis was called the Isthmian bandit. The word isthmus comes from the ancient Greek word for neck and refers to the narrowness of the land. So here is the isthmus and the canal. Taurus happens to rule the neck, and the glyph of Taurus represents the neck. you see here in the old astrological man, Taurus rules the neck. Taurus rules the neck. Taurus is the isthmus, the isthmian portal to the underworld, perhaps. This is the Hyades within Taurus, and we also have the hyoid bone in our neck. Happens to be 153 light years away, so they tell us. They just want to encode 153, which is a very significant number, and we'll get to that later. And they even call these horns in the hyoid bone. It reminded me of the canton Uri in Switzerland. So I drew it up, and I had some more information about Uri. And I found this. Orion was born when the three gods Zeus, Poseidon, and Hermes urinated on a bull hide and buried it in the earth to provide King Hyrieus with a son. The boy was named Orion after the urine, but was also known by the name Candaon. Here's Orion. It just made me think that it probably has to do with the steroids in the urine. And Mithras is always with the bull. Here's the androgynous Mithra. The nymphus, the male bride stage of Mithras, the second stage of initiation. And sure enough, there are urinary steroids from the bull, and also the sperm of the bull. And you see in the tauroctony of Mithras, there's always a scorpion stinging the testicles of the bull. It's called trenbolone esters for their muscle building and otherwise performance enhancing effects. I think this cult of Mithras has a lot to do with the transgender agenda. You have the 6 and the 5, the 6 and the 5, and even the coat of arms, the 6 and the 5 stars, the 6-pointed stars. It's the 4 red giants of the Hyades with Aldebaran. This is an illustration from Fox's Book of Martyrs showing the papists torturing Protestants, in this case being torn apart by trees. And you don't often see them hung this way, but I thought that was rather interesting. And here are a couple of examples of St. Corona being hung this way and not vertically. This one's from the Ortenburg Samurai Church in Lower Bavaria, Patriching Church. Another painting of St. Corona from Staudach, Lower Bavaria. I thought this one was very interesting. This is the altarpiece from the Corona Kirche in Copenhagen. I just cannot imagine going to church every Sunday and staring up at this torture of St. Corona. Here are the 2 crowns being brought down to her. This is a rather glorious picture of St. Corona in the Oberndorf district. Altenkirchen altar. We will encounter these bent tree portals again in the myths of Inanna and the Hulupu tree, another portal to the underworld. The Hulupu tree is the home to the Anzu bird, and Anzu in Feltre, Italy is one of the homes of Corona's relics. We'll have to get to that in a later video. There's another bent palm tree, or the Irminsul. This is in the Externstein relief, a medieval depiction of the descent of the cross. Nicodemus stands on a bent palm tree as he helps lower Jesus from the crucifix. The Irminsul is the Old Saxon great pillar, was a sacred pillar-like object in the Germanic paganism of the Saxons. It was destroyed by Charlemagne during the Saxon Wars. Excuse me. Now, the book of the Fasti is a Latin poem by Ovid, published in 8 AD, and it explains the origins of the Roman holidays associated with the customs. So the Fasti is to the Julian calendar what the Roman martyrology was to the Gregorian calendar. This one is pagan. The martyrology was Christian. So in the May 14th entrance, we have the day before the Ides is marked by Taurus lifting his starry muzzle, the signs explained by a familiar tale. And he goes into the story of Jupiter and Europa, as well as Io. It represents the white bull from the sea, the glinting red eyes, the star of Aldebaran. May 14th, the sun was rising conjunct the head of the bull at this date. Taurus itself would therefore not be visible, but was indeed raising its head. This is the heliacal rising of Aldebaran. The star rise of a star occurs annually when it first becomes visible above the eastern horizon at dawn just before sunrise, thus becoming the morning star, after it has spent a season behind the sun, rendering it invisible. Astrologically, Aldebaran was a fortunate star, portending riches and honor, consistent with Saint Corona being the patron saint of treasure. This star is one of the 4 royal stars of the Persians from around 3000 BC. Here's another depiction of Taurus from Hevelius. Aldebaran is the right eye, Ain is the left eye. These are the 4 Persian royal stars, and they represent the fixed cross of astrology. Here they are overlaid on Metatron's cube. Saint Michael represents Aldebaran, and Archangel Uriel represents Antares. This flag, the red cross, is actually the flag of Archangel Michael, the same one in the judgment card, number 20, in the tarot deck. Here is Aldebaran and Antares. Aldebaran representing spring equinox, and autumn equinox is represented by Antares. This is Cautes and Cautapates from the Tauroctony of Mithras. Here they are down here. So Aldebaran is God's eye with the corona, the eye of revelation, the portal to the mysteries of the mind. And Antares would be the star of anger, pride, and revenge, the portal to the mysteries of the heart. Aldebaran, designated Alpha Tauri and abbreviated to Alpha Tau. It is the brightest star in Taurus, and generally the 14th brightest star in the night sky. The 14 again. Alpha Tauri, or Alpha Tau, is the Alpha and the Omega. I am the first and the last, and beside me there is no God. On March 11th, 509, a lunar occultation of Aldebaran was observed in Athens, Greece. The astronomer Edmund Halley studied the timing of this event, and in 1718, he concluded that Aldebaran must have changed position since that time, moving several minutes of arc further to the north. This led to the discovery of proper motion. So this lunar occultation of Aldebaran, is it the sickle and the star of the Muslims, of Islam? Is this representing the lunar occultation of Aldebaran? This also ties it into the 311 mega ritual. Aldebaran is the eye of God, the eye of illumination. The traditional name of Aldebaran derives from the Arabic for Aldebaran, meaning the follower, because it seems to follow the Pleiades. I think that there's a deeper etymology to this, but I haven't found it yet. "4,500 years ago, the location of the equinox was in the middle of the Golden Gate of the ecliptic. Does anybody remember this song by the Rolling Stones, 2,000 Light Years from Home? I never really looked at the lyrics before, but in the last verse, "Bell Flight 14, you now can land. Seen you on Aldebaran." What are they talking about? Axel Stoll was a far-right, esoteric German geophysicist and conspiracy theorist. He thought that the Aryan race actually are aliens from the star Aldebaran, and that the Earth is a jail planet for those who did wrong. In his opinion, all races are fighting for superiority. I don't know anything about this person, but I thought that was rather interesting, and everything I saw about him was in German, so I don't really know exactly what he's saying. The May 14th entry in book 5 of the Fasti continues. "On this day, too, the Vestals throw effigies made of rushes in the form of old men from the Oak Bridge. When the land was Saturnia, Jove prophetically said something like this: throw 2 people into the Tuscan River as a sacrifice to the sickle-bearing ancient." Ovid is directly talking to the river Tiber, who is crowned in reeds, and he explains what exactly is happening. "I saw this place when it was grassland without walls. Cattle were scattered, grazing on either bank, and Tiber, whom the nations know and fear, were disregarded then even by the cattle. Arcadian Evander is often named to you. A stranger, he churned my waters with his oars. Hercules came here too, with a crowd of Greeks. My name was Albula then, if I remember true. Evander, hero from Pallanteum, received him warmly, and Cacus had the punishment he deserved. The victor left, taking the cattle, his plunder from Erythea, with him, but his friends refused to go any further. Most of them had come from the deserted Argos. They established their hopes in houses on our hills, yet sweet love for their native land often stirred them. One of them, in dying, gave this brief command: throw me into the river Tiber, that carried by Tiber's waves my spiritless dust might journey to the Inachian shore. That funeral duty laid on him displeased his heir. The dead stranger was buried in the Italian ground, and a rush effigy was thrown into the Tiber instead. To return to his Greek home over the wide waters, Tiber spoke, entering a moist cave of natural stone, while you, gentle waters, checked your flow." So this is called the ritual of the Argi, and the Argi are the Greeks who came with Hercules and Evander. Here is Hercules killing the fire-breathing Cacus, son of Vulcan, who'd stolen his cattle. It's ritual purification of the city and human sacrifice to Saturn, so May 14th is tied into this notion of human sacrifice. Tiber was the son of Janus and Kamasene, a nymph. It was from the Tiberinus that the river Tiber gained his name. Prior to that, the river was known as Albula, which means the white. Following Tiberinus's death in the river on its banks, however, its name was changed. In another myth about Janus, Saturn, after being exiled by Jupiter from the heavens, arrives in Janiculum, the city founded by Janus on a ship. The god was received warmly by Janus, and in return for his hospitality bestowed on the king the power to see both into the future and into the past. So, in the future, I would like to go into the relationship of Janus and Saint Corona, but that will have to be for another time. Thank you very much for joining me thus far, and hope to see you soon.